Okay. All right. Welcome to this evening's Select Board meeting. It is Monday, November 18th. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will grant Westwood Media Center permission to record the meeting. Is there anyone else wishing to record this evening's meeting? Okay. Few updates under Chairman's update. First, combination of two things. We have the upcoming Westwood Weekend Stroll, the first annual, taking place from Friday, December 6th through Sunday, December 8th. It will be capped off on the Sunday, December 8th with the annual tree lighting program here outside the police station and town hall, and that will go from 3 to 5. But throughout the weekend, there will be many events and opportunities to shop locally. We encourage people to look at a flyer that will be coming out in the Hometown Weekly, looking at the Town of Westwood official Facebook page and other posters around town. So look for this coming up on Friday, December 6th through Sunday, December 8th. And I'd like to recognize sponsors of the weekend stroll. It includes Alliance Energy, Core Atlas Fitness, Sassy's Boutique, Roach Brothers, Supreme Development, Islington Pizza, and JK Fitness. And the tree lighting is sponsored by Lambert's, Dedham Savings Bank, Roach Brothers, Dessert Works, Dunkin' Donuts, GV&Y Insurance, Fox Hill Village Homeowners Association, Makita Investment Group, the Julia Roth House, Westwood Family Chiropractic, Chiara, Sheer Illusions, the American Legion Post 320, and the Westwood Montessori School. And I would just like to thank all these businesses and organizations for supporting what we're doing within the community to have community building events. I think it's really great, so thank you to all of them. On a little more serious note, and I draw people's attention to this, we are having issues with our recycling. And the issues pertain to contamination of what's going into the recycling. There is an effort by the DPW to educate people, and I think they're going to come up with a PSA, hopefully through Westwood Media Center. They want us to emphasize to everybody that there should be no trash, food waste, or plastic bags put into recycling. If it goes in, it renders the whole load of recycling that ends up in contaminated and no good. So that kind of defeats the purpose. So people need to be motivated. No trash, no food waste, no plastic bags. And believe it or not, people put in things like cords, styrofoam, baby items such as car seats. None of that is good either. The only things that should go into our recycling include plastic bottles and containers that are clean, tin and aluminum cans, beverage cartons, paper, flattened cardboard, and glass bottles. And if you have any questions about things that I haven't mentioned, you can go to the town website for more information, or you can download the app called Recycle Coach, and it has much more detailed information. So I encourage people to take this seriously and do their best to comply, or else it's just all for naught. And we really don't want that to be the outcome.
Yeah.
Yep.
On the
Please.
Recycle Coach, if you go to Recycle Coach, I think it's more important. It is a long thing about things that are recyclable and what not. It's probably more important to read the not recyclable section if you just have to cut the time and figure out what you should not be putting in the recycle bin. It's much easier to read the do not list than it is to go through the other lists. So,
thank you. Okay, moving on. Excuse me. One more update or information piece. Eversource is offering a weatherization program, and this is available to Westwood residents. And you can contact Eversource at 877-817-5938. We should put that up on the town website. And if you contact them, you can schedule a 1-hour no-cost insulation checkup for your home. And Eversource is trying to make this easy to do, more affordable, in terms of adding additional insulation if necessary. And so they're offering a savings right now. If you have questions and can't find the number I just gave, call Town Hall and ask for assistance on this. And is this letter going out, Mike, that we have in our packet? So a letter will be going out from Tom Philbin, who is our energy manager here in the town of Westwood, telling you about this program, telling all homeowners in town or residents in town about this program, and encouraging people to reach out and take Eversource up on this service that they're offering. Okay, on to scheduled action for this evening. We will start with a discussion with Not Your Average Joe's for a change in manager. Hello, come on up if you would.
For the microphone or the front desk?
If you can sit at the table, that would be great. And you know Nora already? Laura Knockman?
Brian, how are you? No,
Okay.
I do not.
You're Brian?
I am.
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Okay, so we have before us a request for change of manager to, I'm going to try, Franciosi?
Pretty good. Franciosi.
Franciosi, okay. Brian is here with us as the new manager at Not Your Average Joe's in Westwood, and as is required, anytime there is a change in management for any of these operations that have the entertainment or alcohol license, it comes before the board.
Absolutely.
And that's why you're here tonight. And we understand from a recent visit we had here with Not Your Average Joe's, where we had a compliance issue, that we knew you were coming.
Yes.
My understanding is you're aware of that compliance issue.
Of course, yes, of course.
And we don't want to have you back in telling us about it happening again.
Absolutely. No, I've been doing this for a
Okay.
long time, never had an incident in my career, and we'll keep it that way. So we're
Good.
taking it real seriously.
Good. Nora, do you have anything you want to report to us in terms of the review of this?
Just that Chief Silva met with Brian and was very, very impressed with his attitude and the way he intends to operate Not Your Average Joe's, and does not foresee any problems going forward. So it seemed to be
Okay.
a positive change. The paperwork is all in order and will be sent to the ABCC.
And has the Corey check been completed yet?
It has.
Okay, so we just have the ABCC
Yes.
issue. Questions from the board?
No.
Any public questions? Anything you want to say, Brian?
I'm thrilled to be here. Like, I mean, this is a beautiful building, too, by the way. You guys have a great. But no, I live in Foxborough. I've run businesses in the area for a while. I opened up and ran the Texas Roadhouse on Route 1 down in Walpole. I was the opening general manager of that, ran that for 5 years. Came to Not Your Average Joe's. I've most recently been the general manager up in Burlington,
Okay.
but I live in Foxborough, so happy to be close. Thrilled to be here.
It's a much better
Oh, it's
commute.
wonderful. I don't even have to hit the highway anymore. Just
Yeah,
through
right,
one. It's
right,
great.
back roads.
Absolutely.
So I'll just leave it with, we take it really seriously.
Of course.
The, having the alcohol license, and Not Your Average Joe's is a great business, and we love having it
Appreciate
here in Westwood, and we're happy to be of assistance if there's any way we can be,
Absolutely.
and hope you don't need to be back for
No
anything other
worries.
than a license
We've
renewal.
held responsible service of alcohol courses, scheduled 4 of them that we're holding right in the
Okay.
restaurant to make sure everyone from this day forward that ever works for us is completely
Yeah.
educated and certified.
Okay, great. I'll take a motion.
So I move that we approve the change of manager of record for Not Your Average Joe's from Michelle O'Brien to Brian Frangiosi, contingent upon the ABC approval.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, none opposed.
Thank you, folks. Look
Thank you
forward
for
to
coming in.
working with
Nice to meet you.
Absolutely.
And
I'm
good
sure
luck.
we'll see
and
you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Hope it's there and not here.
that's what we hope too. That's what we hope
I
too.
didn't mean it any other way.
Okay, next item on the agenda, the community electricity aggregation. I don't know who's here tonight to, well, not yet, Peter. Okay, well, I know you submitted something, but is there anybody presenting? Yeah, come on up. Stefano, you were here with us last time.
Yes.
Okay, so when we last met, we opened up the comment period for community members to provide input on the proposed community aggregation, electricity aggregation program that was open from October 29th to December 12th. We're back here tonight to receive any written comments and any oral comments that people want to make. And I think then with that, we'll look for feedback from you on comments Because I already know somebody would like to speak, so let's do that and get your response and guidance to us. And then I think we want to get in, I would like to at least get into more of the information we received on, I don't know if, I guess I'll call it a proposal at this point. There's a lot of information we have in our meeting packets to absorb about this and what we do for next steps.
Yeah, and I had the questions printed out, but I guess Peter, that's Peter, I'll let him ask him himself.
Yeah, why don't we do that first? So first I'll ask the select board, do you want to, okay to get public comments at this point? Or do you have any questions?
Yes.
Okay. Peter, why don't you come up, because I know you took some time to give us very extensive comments. And just so you know, we have your submittal that you gave in writing. If there's anything you would like to add to that, please feel free to. And first identify yourself, please.
Yes, I would like to make a couple of comments. One is that I'm generally supportive of the proposal for a Westwood electricity aggregation program. A major advantage of this program is the potential cost savings from combining the buying power of a large group of customers. However, I do have some concerns and suggestions, as you know, particularly to reduce the cost of the program for the residents of Westwood. Massachusetts has very expensive electricity in comparison with other states. We can try to be thrifty as well as green. I sent a memo, as you know, to the board about these issues. I'd like to hit a couple of points. First, I propose either deleting the local requirement from the green energy portion of the Westwood service or making it an option. I'm concerned that the local green requirement may significantly increase the cost of the service by excluding cheaper green sources, including hydroelectric power from Quebec. Hydro-Quebec is one of our least expensive sources of electricity. This issue may become more important if additional electric transmission lines are built, as has been proposed, to increase the small capacity of the existing lines connecting Massachusetts and Quebec. Massachusetts currently generates electricity using oil from Arabia, liquefied natural gas from Arabia and Russia, and wind power from Chinese turbines. I believe that it is foolish and costly to exclude clean hydroelectric power from Quebec and green energy from other states. An alternative would be to make the local requirement an option for those who wish to pay more for this restriction. Next, I recommend dropping the proposed penalty rate for returning customers. Eversource doesn't do this penalty, and Westwood shouldn't either. This penalty is apparently intended to discourage customers from comparison shopping on the state website that lists rates for individual contracts. This is only an issue if the prices offered by the aggregation program are excessive. Allowing customers to switch without penalty will provide a useful check on excessive prices. This penalty appears to be a violation of the required equitable treatment of all customer classes. The proposal tries to evade the equitable treatment requirement by creating a separate class for returning customers in order to implement this penalty. I propose dropping the separate class and the penalty rate. Next, I propose that the Westwood basic service include a 6-month fixed option on the same schedule as the Eversource basic service, which offers a rate that is fixed for 6 months at a time, announced in December and June. This will probably be less expensive than a long-term fixed rate and will allow a simple comparison with the Eversource basic service and competitive services. Shorter-term contracts for electricity are often cheaper in Massachusetts, and there is often a large variation in prices between summer and winter. Electricity in Massachusetts is often more expensive in the winter due to the small capacity of the gas main that connects Massachusetts to natural gas supplies from the U.S. South and West, particularly the segment from New York City to Boston. In the winter, some natural gas is diverted to heat homes, and some electric generation switches over to use oil from Arabia and liquefied natural gas imported from Arabia and Russia through the Everett LNG terminal, which those, by the way, usually get Coast Guard escorts when those ships come in. Due to seasonal variation, market fluctuations in the price of fuel, and the gradually tightening state green mandate, now at 25% for this year, it is risky for a supplier to offer long-term fixed price contracts. They tend to demand higher prices for this service. Next, I have a concern about the proposed payments to the New York firm that will run the program. I suggest adding a line to the contract to the effect that the specified fee, which is to be added to the electric rates, will be the sole compensation to the service provider, and that any rebates, commissions, or other compensation from suppliers will be reported to the town and promptly returned to the town or to the customers directly. Finally, I have concerns about the mailing proposed to Westwood households. I propose that the return postcards show more than an opt-out checkbox for the default service. Rather, I suggest checkboxes for each option, and that the cover letter clearly explain all options and the differences between them, and that this be sent to all households. The memo that I sent previously shows a possible format for a comparison table. I believe that the town should want citizens to be able to make informed choices on something that has a significant cost for many. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on, Peter. Mr. Hickey would like to ask some
I have
questions.
2 questions, but one, I need to go to you first. Yeah, can you just explain that issue of if I'm currently enrolled in another company other than Eversource, I cannot be included in that initial class?
Right, so the way the statute is right now, when the program launches, eligible customers are defined as those that are on the Eversource basic service rate
Okay.
and that have not put a block on their account for their information to never be shared with.
Okay, so that's
Any third party.
driven by statutory regulation.
That's
It's not
right.
discretionary, okay. And then I guess, so that helps me with the second question. Peter, I think this is great. I really appreciate all the time and effort you put into this. I think the one piece where I was just a little curious for your thoughts, though, on the piece, if someone opts out, goes to another vendor, or, right, another source of their electricity, and then returns, they return at the then current rate, the higher rate, correct?
No,
You're calling it the penalty rate.
no, that's not the way it would work. On your first question, though, there is the separation of classes initially has to do with those who are on the Eversource basic service now. Those are the people who are defined to be eligible. There are others who choose individual contracts, and they are not treated as eligible under the proposal.
But I think the question I asked, well, what's driving that? And the answer we're getting is that that's statutorily driving that decision. That's
State
not,
law.
That's not an optional piece for the Westwood policymakers.
I believe that Westwood may choose to send a letter to every household in Westwood.
Okay, well, let's.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to start a debate, yeah.
So, thank you.
All right.
Your input is very valuable. Is there anyone else who wants to provide public comment? Maria, then you either need to come to the table or to the microphone, or we can give the microphone to you. Okay, please do. And for the record, Maria, you are on our committee.
Yeah, I'm representing the CA working group.
Where it's not us, we can hear you. It's those at home that may not be able to hear you.
So I'm Maria Costantini. I am the chair of the CA working group, the
Community
Community Aggregation. And sorry, I have prepared. I also submitted my our comments to.
Oh, they were
So-
submitted today.
Yeah, they were submitted.
You were
today.
late. No, it's okay. We're
Well,
taking.
we were late for the written comments.
I'm just teasing you.
yeah.
We're here tonight to still
Yeah.
receive comments.
We would like to tweak a little bit the standard product, which is page 2 of 16 of the municipal aggregation plan by making the following changes. And these changes are dictated by some conversation that we have had in the last few months within WEAC as well as with the working group. So instead of stating starkly that the local green product is expected to include 5% of the green energy, we would like to say a minimum of 5% to give us options perhaps of even having a little higher as the basic. As for the higher percentages, we would like to have two options. So the Westwood premium would be 50% and 100%. Right now it's only 100%. This is because we feel that people may be scared to go, price and other things to go too high, but 50% may be a compromise. And Stefano has done some informal surveys of some customers who have chosen the 50%, and that's the reason they say that they felt more comfortable with the price.
You're covering the microphone,
So they felt more comfortable with the price. So these are comments, basically just to expand a little bit the options. And I also would like to take this opportunity to make a comment that the Warren article specified that we would use local renewable energy.
Yeah, I recall that as well. Okay, so I need him. I need you to respond to a lot of this, if you would. So can you guys free up the table
Should we
for
just go?
All right,
for now?
I did have an additional comment in response to
Oh, something new, Peter?
Yes.
Oh,
well,
okay. Please have a
there was
seat. Have a
There was
seat.
a second part of the question that I didn't respond to, that part about the
To your question.
the returning customers.
Yes.
They are described in the proposal as, it's all customers that join the program after having previously opted out will be offered a price based on then current market rates, whatever that means, rather than the standard contract price. That means there will be a penalty rate for those customers. Also, I did want to make clear regarding the 5% issue that the state mandates a minimum of 25% now that might go up next year. So the 5% issue has to do with, in addition to the 25% that is required of everything by the state.
Okay.
But, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your diligence in this. Okay, Stefano, help us out here. This is a lot of good information and a lot of good feedback. Is there anybody else before I keep jumping back and forth? Okay, I just want to make sure I give everybody a chance. Okay.
Thank you.
Your input, it would be welcome.
Great. Well, would you like me to maybe answer some of his questions? First of all, Peter.
I would.
Thank you for the comments. You really put a lot of thought into it, and that's definitely appreciated. A lot of good points raised here. I don't have it quite in the same format as I think you presented it. I have what was emailed, so I think
That's
it's the same
fine.
questions, just maybe in a slightly different order.
Yeah, if you can
So
cover.
the chart that is included, that's on this page, that is required to be in the opt-out letter. There's some flexibility with the form of that. We're in the middle of actually trying to get that form modified by the DPU, but that letter is highly regulated by the Department of Public Utilities, and we have to work within the framework of their requirements. But it will be similar in that we will try and present all of the options, the variables associated with that, obviously the cost associated with that, in as clear a form as we think we can do. In terms of the opt-out notices, as I mentioned, the original opt-out letters will only be sent to those that are eligible. That being said, and to Peter's exact point, after that initial launch, we can request from the Department of Public Utilities a list of ineligible customers. Those might be people that are on competitive supply. Those might be people that have a block on their account. And then we can craft a separate letter aimed at them, which will require them to take action if they want to join. So it's not going to be an opt-out letter. It will be, here's some information about the program. We realize that
You can opt in.
if you want to join, you can opt in. So we will absolutely make an effort to reach out to those. That was a recent change that the Department of Public Utilities made, because it was determined that a significant percentage of people that were with a third-party supplier may not have actually been aware they were with a third-party supplier. So this will allow us to at least contact them, let them know that there's a program in town, and at the very least, it'll make them aware that they are with a third-party supplier and to check
So
their
you're
bill.
optimistic a regulatory approval could be received?
We will. That's been a recent change where they have, a lot of communities have been asking, saying, you know, there's a lot of people
Similar.
that we meet. We go to a lot. I've been personally to a dozen, and unfortunately, it's often the elderly that when we go meet with them and we look at their bills and they're with a third-party supplier and have no idea, and they're paying really high rates. So to send that communication out is something that is
Go ahead,
important.
go for it.
So, so what rate, let's say that, first time that they weren't allowed to be, part of the group. So now you do the second wave, right? And people who were ineligible the first time to opt
Okay.
in. What rate would they come in at?
So anybody that's coming into the program for the first time would always be getting the contract rate.
Okay.
To the question that Peter has put in here, which is a very good one, is people that leave and want to come back into the rate. Now, I can tell you that we have had programs active since January of 2016. And since that time, there's been a lot of people that opt out, only to realize at a later time that, wow, that's actually a good deal. I want to get back in. And in 100% of those instances, they've been given the contract rate. The only reason it's worded like that is because years ago, these programs used to last only 6 months.
Right.
And what would happen is you'd have a program go for 6 months, and then everybody back to basic service. And then we're going to launch it again 6 months later because there's such volatility between the summer and winter here. So you'd have a program in the winter, back to basic service in the summer, start in the winter. That laid havoc with the utilities who are trying to procure electricity, trying to understand what the demand that they would have to serve was. So the Department of Public Utilities was the one that said, if you leave the program, there's no guarantee you're getting that basic service, that contract rate if you want to rejoin as a deterrent. That being said, suppliers, unless it was a systemic thing where Westwood raises the flag of, everybody opt out and then everybody wants to come back in, the suppliers is fine with giving a contract rate and not having to create, potentially hundreds of different pricing
Can the
tags.
language be changed, though, to mirror that?
Well, the thing is this, there's the way the law is written, and then there's the way it's practiced. The suppliers are not obligated to give you a contract rate, and that's the way it's written.
So your answer to my question is no.
Yeah, I don't think we would get that approved.
I don't mind yes and no.
I'm
just-
sorry,
But it's an aggregation. I mean, if you were to allow people to just keep switching depending on the lowering rate, you'd ultimately harm the whole program,
Yeah.
right? You have to opt in and keep a class of people together to make it be successful.
Yeah, and that's not a question that was asked, but sometimes people ask that. If everybody in town except you opts out, are they still gonna honor that rate just for you? And the question is yes. And what we're finding, and this is a general comment, some of you may be aware of the Attorney General's investigation into the benefits of deregulation for me and you, for the average residents. It's undisputed for large municipal buildings, this building, town schools, office buildings. There's value there. 98% are participating in deregulation. She has questioned the benefits for the average homeowner. And through her research, and it was lengthy, about 18 months, that residents generally that are with competitive supplier have paid significantly more. Now, that's for the average person that may get solicited and be sold by clever marketing into a program that if you're not monitoring on a monthly basis or have a detailed understanding of how these markets work, and that you can't just call them on a Monday and say, I went out and you're out on a Tuesday. It could take 2 or 3 billing cycles to change. these programs are not, and I would never say that we are going to beat the basic service rate every 6 months. As Peter correctly suggested, we only found out the winter service rates for Eversource 3 days ago. And if I wanted to change, I may not even be able to change in time to benefit from those or to change a supplier. So the point of this program is to provide a transparent, vetted option, vetted by both the municipality as well as Department of Public Utility and Department of Energy Resources with no fees ever. You can come and go, and there's never any penalties. And we'd never be able to assure you that it's going to be below any basic service rate except for the one that's immediately in front of us when we launch, because I can tell you the rate starting January 1. I do not know the rates starting July 1, and I won't know those until a month before. So that is part of what these programs are, and we have seen growth in all our programs because most people, they want to feel like they can benefit from this, but they're also, to go out on your own as an individual can be daunting because there's a lot of contracts and terminology and nuance to the way the rates change in Massachusetts. Sometimes it's different in National Grid as opposed to Eversource. The terms they rate are different, so it can be very complicated. And that's really what this program is about, providing a vetted, transparent, no penalty option for residents as a safe harbor where there will be a website dedicated to it. They'll always be able to see the aggregation rate compared to the basic service rate. And what you'll find over time is that your population will become very educated, and they will understand how this works. They will look at their bills. They will know that when the phone rings and it's somebody saying, hey, I got this phone call a week ago. I'm calling from Eversource to see if you're eligible for an electricity discount. And I said, well, if you're from Eversource, we need to verify your account number. Well, if you're from Eversource, you tell me my account number. They hang up because that's not a legitimate offer there. All those things that we get in our mailbox. There is a website that the state has put together for comparing these. And what's good is that the aggregation program can show up as one of the options on that. Again, it may not always be the lowest, but it will always have no fees, and it will always be transparent in that regard. No fine print, no small print, no fix for 30, 90 days, and then it's going to change, and then you go to cancel, and you get hit with a $200 penalty. There'll never be any of that. Sorry, I went on a little bit longer there. There was another point on this that I wanted to make. Oh, in terms of the opt-out letter, being able to select which one of the options you want as part of the opt-out letter. So that's, the DPU does not want that, because you could imagine the nightmare that would happen if somebody felt they were opting out, ticked the wrong box to instead go to 100%, and now instead of being out of the program, they're in the most expensive option in the program and may not realize for a few months and so forth. So the opt-out portion of this is purely to determine whether you're in or out. Once you're in, you can change the options. I agree, it's a little clumsy the way you have to do it, but it just is the way the statute is designed right now to make sure that people aren't inadvertently making a choice to either, maybe they want to opt up and accidentally they opt out. So that is why the opt-out letter has no other options except to opt out. Sorry, I don't know. Was there another question that I missed there that you?
6-month terms?
6-month terms. So people often ask us, what's the benefit of these programs? We have buying power, but we don't have as much buying power as Eversource or National Grid. Well, our advantage is very simply that those utilities have to run bids for electricity on specific days of the year for a specific term. That term is 12 months for 50% of the residential load. So the price you pay at any given point is a blend of those two most recent purchases made by the utility. Our advantage is we don't have to go to bid on particular days. We can go to bid when the market is advantageous. And we don't have to bid for just 6 months. We can go on an advantageous term. And what we have found since our programs have been running is that people like stability. People like knowing, hey, this rate isn't going to change for 2 or 3 years. And now that's really been the norm. I don't know of any aggregation that's launched in the last 2 years that's done it for a term of less than maybe 20 months, 21 months. So that's really one of the advantages. It's really the only advantages we have over basic service. It's not the buying power. We have more buying power than you or me individually, but we don't have as much as Eversource. Our advantage is go to bid when the market's good and go to bid for the most advantageous term.
And then there's why are you limiting just to local?
And so this is something that I think the reason it was in the warrant in the town is there's, in the town meeting warrant, is because not just Westwood, but a lot of communities, there's probably 36 communities, not just Good Energy communities, but other communities in the last 2 years that have decided to use these programs as a tool to get more renewable generation in Massachusetts and in the New England ISO, which covers the grid that covers all 6 New England states, and not to go and buy renewable energy from Texas or New York or Canada, where it is cheaper, right? So if you want to buy renewable energy from Texas, it could cost 30 cents, whereas here it'll cost $35 per megawatt. So that's part of why it's expensive, is because if you go to Texas, you could see you literally can see 100 miles where nothing but solar and wind turbines. So we wanted, the goal of this, and when I say we, I'm talking about we Westwood as opposed to we Good Energy. We don't make any more money or any less money, whether you go 100% green, whether it's Texas green. We are completely indifferent to that. But the goal was to do something locally. And every resident will have an option that if you don't want to pay that premium, there will be what's called the basic option, which will not have any more renewable energy than the minimum required by state law. And then to Maria's point, there could be a minimum of 5% more. The reason we said minimum is because we're expecting this to probably not launch for potentially a year. And we will look at the price of renewable energy at that time. If it's not as expensive, we'll be able to do 7-10%. If it's become more expensive, probably want to stick to the minimum. We don't want to make that default option too far of a disadvantage off basic service, because basic service is only required. And when we talk about renewable energy, you mentioned 25%. We're not concerned with what are called Class 2. We're looking only at what are considered Massachusetts Class 1 RECs, which is renewable energy that's basically been developed since 1997, so relatively new. And that's the organic tomatoes of the energy of what we're looking for. So next year it goes up to 16% in 2020. So 16 of that 25% is MA Class 1. So 5% more than that is actually close to 30% more of those Class 1. So I want to make sure that everybody's clear. It's 5% of 16% next year, not 5% of 25%. It's actually a very meaningful number. I think you'd be surprised to see what that does across an entire community. It's quite impactful.
So you're saying that the cheaper alternatives, Texas, Canada, or whatever, are just not part of this program?
No.
So if somebody wants to find a cheaper alternative and manage it separately, they don't have to participate in this?
Yeah, there's that website that's quoted here, the EnergySwitchMA.gov has plenty of options for individuals and you can get 100% green, and it'll cost you almost next to nothing because it's being sourced from Texas.
So what this compares to is, for those of us who don't haven't sought out some cheaper, something that we manage individually, this is meant to be, over the long term, a greener and hopefully less expensive alternative to what we're getting from Eversource today.
Correct.
Okay. Maybe I'm starting to get this stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you want to watch the stock market every day and invest yourself, you can make more money than having your broker check it every 6 months.
Okay, so thank you for saying yes.
No, that was well said.
I said this earlier, a lot of information we received today for this discussion. And in it, one of the things I noticed, and I'll ask my colleagues to comment as well on anything that they're also want to know further about, but there's a letter that was drafted to go out to people. It's a draft letter. I don't know how much it's regulated. If I got this in the mail as Joe citizen in town, not somebody who's engaged in this
Right.
discussion firsthand, it would scare me. I would just look at it and say, this looks like something I don't want to know anything about. It needs a lot of TLC to come across better for the consumer. So this needs work.
Without a doubt. So I refer to that as somebody said it to me the other day, and it was spot on. He said, this looks like the warranty for my dishwasher.
That's well put. It's very ominous. It's very.
And so
Yeah.
what happened, having
like that.
recently
I like
replaced the
that.
dishwasher, I was very aware of what that looked like. So anyway, so your
Is this
point,
what they look like that other towns have done?
so it's like a standard form like
highly
that. And
regulated.
here's what happened. So years ago, it was somewhat, it wasn't rigid what you could make that look like. And it was a far larger font. It didn't go to the very edge of every page, and it only filled about a page and a quarter. The Department of Public Utilities has required us to add more and more language in there as a way of consumer protections, making them aware of, savings are not guaranteed. You'll see that, I think, in a few places there. And the end result is a document that I think, and the feedback, believe me, you're not alone, and I'm a consumer as well. And if I got that, I don't know if it would, I would not even take the time to put on my glasses and read
wouldn't
it. So
Well,
we are aware
let me
of
tell you what
that.
it starts out with, which is just where the beginning of the changes has to occur. Dear basic service customer.
Right,
From the town of Westwood.
right.
Who's the basic service customer? That's not even language I would know what that means by
Right.
picking up a letter.
So we have submitted a new form to the Department of Public Utilities. I was hoping that over the next few weeks, we would get that approval so that we could include it with your plan to the Department of Public Utilities. But even if we don't have that approval, we can submit a new form, which I've shown Maria, and I can send to the Select Board as well, that is a far more user-friendly, is how I'll refer to it. It's got,
Can't get any less user-friendly.
well, this
say
was,
that.
this was a document that we feel
Jinx.
captures all of the requirements the DPU has while presenting it in a user-friendly, engaging, shall I say, colorful and just more of an engaging document that I think if you received, you'd be far more receptive to taking a look. There's a lot more white space. Again, I can send that, and even, again, I don't want to, just because the DPU hasn't approved it, we're filing it as an amendment for our existing aggregation. So that is the letter that all active programs are using. We want to be able to change that to this new form. And then we could have put that if it was approved in your plan, but we can put it as unapproved in your plan because part of the reason we're submitting your plan to the DPU is for approval. So I think you'll find it a far better document without a doubt. But, so just one thing is for sure, that by the time your program launches, it will not look like that.
Oh, you can be sure the program won't launch if it looks
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And to have something that in the second paragraph in bold, all caps said you must mail and postmark your opt-out card on or before X date. It's like
Yeah,
it's like a
it's-
threat.
Well, that's the specific DPU language right there.
Yeah, but does it have to be presented that way?
So that's what we're working on, is having the same information presented differently.
What about a subtlety? Somewhere in this material it talked about having 30 days, 30-ish days.
So that, yeah, that's what those.
Is that a
that's-
regulated
That's part
amount?
of the statute, 30 days to opt out.
Wow.
And it's just, so the opt-out period is really the mechanism for the launch of the program, because you can opt out anytime, and there's never a penalty. The
Yeah.
opt-out period is the mechanism by which it starts, and now it's 36 days. They're allowing for 3 days mailing
Okay.
and 3 days on either end, which is why when they added those 3 days at either end, they added that segment about, you need to mail this on X date to make sure that you're returning it within the window, because you don't want somebody to return it after that window, get enrolled, and then say, "But I opted out." Well, if you send it in past a certain day, you're going to miss it. So So we are, look, I totally hear what you're saying. You are definitely not the first one. The document has been deteriorating as time has gone on, as it's gotten more and more requirements. And it's now become something that we have heard described as appearing to be a scam, which to me is just about the worst thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I think as the DPU gets
Well,
that
what
feedback-
concerns me is that the town of Westwood is at the top of it. And that's what concerns me in general, is three of us are going to decide whether or not this goes forward, and it's going to reflect on us and the town if this doesn't go well. So that's why I'm
Right.
trying to absorb all this, and it's a lot. But John, Mike, what do you
The
have
thing
things
is,
to say?
if you read this letter, or you get this in the mail, most people are going to throw it away. So they've already opted in.
Or they're already staying
They're
there,
in.
they're
They're
not
already in.
opting out.
Right,
Right, so that's the first thing that I think is the consumer who gets it.
right,
And if you don't bother reading it, you're in.
right.
And to Nancy's point, couldn't we put the name of, I don't know, your company at the top and then say Westwood has, recently approved the community aggregation, and here are the terms as opposed to the town of Westwood at the top?
So there's been a lot of discussion for years as to what is the best. Some communities wanted to create a logo and almost create a brand around the program. And what became immediately apparent, not with our communities, one of our competitors' communities, is they were inundated with criticism that it looked like the same thing we get in our mailbox. It looked like what's called a retail offer, and it was decided that the best brand, the best logo, to try and represent some legitimacy to this is the town or the city that it's sent from. I'm very optimistic that if you were to see the new form that we've submitted to the DPU, that you'd be more receptive.
Okay, so couldn't we see it first and then,
Yeah, we don't have
Yeah.
to decide.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
well,
don't-
well, it's not approved, and it's for the city of
I
Melrose.
understand, I understand it's
it'll
not
be-
approved, but
right,
at least we get
okay.
an idea of what it
Yeah,
looks like.
Absolutely.
I don't want perfection to be the enemy of the good. These things are highly regulated. They're very complicated. They're not going to look like your Christmas card, right? Even the new form is still going to leave much to
I'm sure. it will.
dissatisfy visually. It's not, it's not meant to be glossy and selling things. It's meant to be informative and to comply with government regulations. So I'm not so sure that I want the form to be the driver of whether we move forward tonight. I think that as a town, we voted to move forward. We've vetted this program. We've collected information. So I don't want us to be I don't want the driver of a decision to be how good the form looks. I mean, I'm comfortable moving forward. I don't know.
But I think it needs almost like a cover letter, John, that says, this is what we've done, da-da-da-da-da. Attached, please find the information that you need to review. That's more of an official letter from the town saying, listen, we approved this at town meeting, you voted on it, and so
Nothing
here
stops
is
us
the
from
plan.
having a
the
supplemental level
the chances
letter.
of people reading this versus a cover letter, I mean, when people see a lot of words, I'm not sure
So-
that we're.
We're a year away, aren't we, from that?
I'm sorry?
We're a year away from sending this letter, aren't we?
We're a year away from sending this letter. So I think maybe to your point is there's a lot of time for all of this.
Okay.
All of this stuff to be incorporated. And what's amazing is when they first changed this letter, it was that ipsum lorem, the Latin they put in as a placeholder.
Yes.
And I immediately, without my glasses, and I said, this is awesome, and then realized there wasn't even English. So visually, I think you'd be amazed at just how different it looks when you have it professionally kind of laid out by somebody that understands how people generally skim documents, where their eyes gravitate towards. And so the content, as it's there, we can add any type of content like that. We just can't get rid of the
Right.
DPU's
No, I understand.
document.
The
Oh,
question
gotcha.
tonight is, should you move forward and submit your overall plan to the DPU? That's the
So
question for this evening,
The question for this evening, yeah, and I can tell you that before we submit the plan that we would submit, so we can't submit it until we get the letter of consultation from DOER, which will probably take 3 weeks, hopefully, kind of around the holidays. Maybe it could push into January, but hopefully we get that before that plan gets submitted. It will not have this letter submitted in it. It will have the new form letter. And while it's not going to have the exact language because that's not so important to the DPU. It will just have all of their language in this new form. And that will be submitted to the DPU. That will be in your plan that gets submitted to the DPU, along with the changes of minimum of 5%, as well as the 50% option, which are also at no point, there's a little bit of an art where you submit a plan to the DPU that has enough information to satisfy them, but doesn't box you in. Because you may decide that maybe 50% isn't a good option. Maybe you don't want to have that third option. Maybe it should be 60%. So there's enough flexibility in there that we're not committed at any point to, live and die with exactly what we're submitting a year before the program launches, because a lot can happen in the year, and the DPU realizes
So
that.
what is the purpose of this submittal? Just put it at its basic. What does this next step mean?
This vote?
The next step, if we vote to say, yes, go to the next step, what does that mean exactly?
That you are authorizing Good Energy to submit this plan to the DPU on the town's behalf.
And the plan is flexible.
And the plan can be modified if you chose to change some of the options. The plan is 99.9% boilerplate for every community. When you meet with the DPU, they tell you plagiarism is encouraged. Don't reinvent the wheel. There's over 100 of
Oh,
these.
because they don't want to think too hard either.
There's
so.
100 of these aggregations. I think it's 119 active aggregations. So this is what's worked. This will be our 53rd submission to the DPU. So the flexibility and the variability lies around what you want to do with renewables, what kind of options you want to identify, and that's basically it. So
Well, I think the other part is the launch and how we handle it internal to the community so that people are informed and educated. And because if they just receive some kind of form letter like this, that would kind of fall flat.
But a communication plan can exist
That's
in
totally-
parallel.
yeah, so we
That's
would
where
never,
I'm-
ever just want to send out that letter.
Yeah, and I
mean,
understand that, but it really
Yeah,
needs
I
to
mean,
be
we
done
would send,
thoughtfully.
normally what we do is we have an extensive marketing development plan where we develop an outreach plan that's in 3 phases. The first phase is the whole DPU approval, where it could be a year. We have a website, some basic information, lets people know what's going on. Then once we have DPU approval, we go to phase 2, which is a launch plan, which involves a lot of public meetings. I know you have a really dynamic outreach email system. There's a Facebook page. There's a postcard that will go to everybody, letting them know they're going to get this letter, so we can put some information about that in a postcard that goes to people. So it's basically a postcard to tell them they're going to get this letter. Very effective, because then people are not surprised. We do all kinds of printouts in town hall, oversized copies of the letter, hang in public libraries, places like this, and so people will be familiar with this. We absolutely don't just launch a program. And then after the program launches, there's an ongoing marketing plan. Make people aware of how the Eversource rates change. There's a lot, those marketers that inundate our mailboxes, if you notice, there's a couple of times a year where they're especially active, and it's around the Eversource rate changes, because that's the time when they could play a little bit of a game with the rates. So, if someone was to tell you in May that they can get you an 11.5 rate, and you're looking at your bill saying Eversource is 12.5 and I'm at 11.5, hey, that's a good deal. Little did you know, if you did nothing a month later, your rate might have gone to 10. And so that's the ongoing education piece that lives through the entirety of the program. We are compensated on a volumetric basis, which means our incentive is to make sure people are in the program, aware of the program. If somebody moves into town, we do regular sweeps to identify those newly eligible people. If someone moves within town, right, you close your Eversource account here, you open it there, make sure that people know that instead of going through the whole 30-day opt-out period that can basically take 3 to 4 months before you're actually in the program, you can just pick up the phone, call, or send an email, and you'll be in within potentially the next meter read cycle. So the outreach is a huge part of what we do, but that's kind of like after we submit the plan to the DPU, then we kind of work on that piece.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
So, Stefan, what happens to any rebates, commissions, or other compensation from competitive suppliers? What happens to that? I know that it was brought up in our letter. What happens to those right now?
We
your
receive no
plan.
rebates, no other compensation than what's listed on, that's listed in the plan, 1/10 of a penny per kilowatt hour.
So there are none.
There are no rebates, there's no other commissions, there's no incentives. Whether you go 100% green or 0% green doesn't make us more or less, so we do not get compensated in any way outside of that 1/10 of a penny.
Yeah, it was brought up, and I'm just.
Yeah, no, that
wondering,
was
yes.
actually in here as well, so.
Yeah, number 5, yes.
Right.
Anybody dying to add any further comment? Because I think we're exhausting this conversation.
Sorry.
No.
No, it need to have
I
it.
invited it.
We needed to have
Are
it.
they still
so-
awake?
Yeah, this is going to be a long night.
All right,
Okay,
you ready for a motion?
I guess so.
I move that we authorize Good Energy LP to submit the community electricity aggregation plan to the Department of Public Utilities on behalf of the town, pending consideration of comments received and review by town
Well,
council.
we're not pending, so,
Okay.
right, Mike? It says in our motion, pending consideration of public comments
I don't think
received.
Pat had a
No,
chance to review.
That was
it.
tonight.
That
Public
was
comment
tonight,
Okay.
so
received.
just on behalf
So
of
it's on
the-
behalf of the town, period.
To be submitted on behalf of the town, period.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. And I will state for the record, we need to really be thoughtful about the steps following and the communication plan, and I think, I know I would want to engage with our committee closely, because I think we have to really do this right for the town. Not that we wouldn't want to, but I
No,
just want to make sure we
absolutely.
really do. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Okay, Mr. Wizialko, we have a collector's report. The tax collector is here.
Everybody's got to wake up
Must be that time of the year.
I know, 'cause this is riveting.
Won't be as long, I promise.
Thank you. We won't ask as many questions, I promise.
Perfect.
What do the letters look like you
It
sent
is,
out?
Annually,
Real
we
quick.
like to have our tax collector come in and tell us about what his staff and what's going on in town in terms of collecting tax revenue, which fuels and provides us with our annual budget, highest revenue source to run the town each year.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So if we look at this first slide, shows the collection rates, and it shows a history of great collection rates. You'll see 2019 at the bottom, 99.69%. I recorded liens on November 11th, and we only had 11 liens that were recorded, which is phenomenal, out of over 5,000 households in Westwood. That was great.
Expect those 11 to pay?
Sorry?
Do you expect those 11 liens to end up getting paid?
Um,
I mean, eventually they have to, but,
6, yes, they will.
okay.
I'm confident. So this compares Westwood to other communities, and we're right up there with Wellesley, Waltham, Hingham, Canton, and Barnstable. This slide's interesting. Just take a moment to go through this. So motor vehicle excise tax, we collected over $3.7 million.
Keep going.
Okay, sorry. So that's roughly 17,000 bills. But one thing I want to stress is the online. So we accept online motor vehicle, personal property, real estate, and sewer bills. Of the online bills for motor vehicle, that represent 40% of our collections. And to pay online, it's a 40-cent fee as opposed to mailing your payment to the town, which is 55 cents on a stamp. So it's much more convenient, it's cheaper, we get the money right away, it's perfect. On the online, on personal property, there are not as many bills, obviously, and that represents 10% online. Real estate, we have numerous banks that escrow the real estate payments. So that's 50% roughly, and then another 20% is paid online, and sewer is about 33% online, and it's increasing on auto pay. So the more people that can pay it online, we would appreciate that, because the money gets into the coffers much quicker, and it saves the town money. Top 10 taxpayers in town.
We aren't really seeing much change in that.
We haven't,
Most of it's University Avenue related.
correct, and they're all paying, so that's wonderful. The tax rates, I know Pam's going to talk about the tax shift after me, but you'll see from 2018 to 2019, the residential went down a tad, as did the commercial side. So for fiscal year '20, the total budget in the collector's office is $205,000, which includes salaries, other expenses, and the other expenses mostly postage, dues, some lockbox and online fees that we pay. So we collect $87 million into the town. We have a staff of 2.5. So based upon the budget and the collections, I think we have the most cost-effective office in Town Hall. The last slide is our continued commitment to service with our staffing, ongoing attention to detail and accuracy, continue the automating collection process and the online services we provide to the town, and the collection rates of the 87 million. And Janice and Laurie do a tremendous job, and they should be commended for their efforts in Town Hall. They do a tremendous job with the taxpayers in the town of Westwood, and we appreciate their service.
We appreciate yours. Any questions for Mr. Wisialko?
No, staff is always friendly. So.
Thank you.
People like to go into Town Hall just to see them.
right.
Directly.
Perfect.
Good news, it's great to see that we continue to have such a high collection rate, and that's a credit to our residents in the community, so, and our commercial taxpayers. That's great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Okay. Ms. Dukeman, we now have a discussion of our tax classification, probably one of the more complicated things for sound bites.
We
It's
just said we think it's going to sound smooth after your.
We're not here to speak on community aggregation.
Thank you. But nonetheless, tax classification is extremely important, and it just really represents the culmination of a lot of hard work that we've been doing to improve our commercial tax base, which we continue to work diligently at. But I think tonight you've got a recommendation just to reflect how strong our residential tax base is.
We do, and we'll go through some slides just to kind of share with you some of the numbers and what we're seeing.
Oh, yes, can you just
overall.
introduce yourselves for the record?
Absolutely. My name is Mark Murphy. I'm the chair of the Board of Assessors.
And Pam Dukeman, Finance Director.
John Curran, Town Assessor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is a public hearing that you have to
Right,
have
right.
each year as you vote the tax shift.
Thank you. I will open the public hearing.
And you know, we're prepared today to make a recommendation as we do every year.
Thank you.
So just a few slides here to give you, just to review some information on historical information and what we're seeing for FY20, and then a recommendation and what the impact of that recommendation will be. So FY20 values, we are finalizing, or numbers are final, values and assessments are finalized for FY20. And just to remind everyone, the date of valuation for FY20 is as of January 1, 2019, so approximately 10 and a half months ago. And it's based upon sales activity that occurred in 2018. So there's always that historical lag, and sometimes it's just important for the residents to understand that the assessments today do not reflect current value, they reflect value from the preceding year. Value for new growth is as of June 30th, 2019. The state allows us to pick up new growth even after the January 1 valuation date, and we're allowed to do that up until June 30th of that year. FY20 total value changes. The overall value increase in town was an increase of 5.6%. from FY19 to FY20. Residential values increased at a greater rate, 6.43%. 98% of the homes experienced a value increase. That's not surprising, given what we know about the residential market. 86% of the homes had an increase between 3 and 8%. So relatively tight band. Commercial values increased 1.13%. With that increase, commercial value in FY20 will make up 15.25% of the overall value in town. That's actually a slight decrease from FY19, when it was 15.9%. You may or may not remember this discussion last year, and we said what we expected was exactly that, which was that we would see increases in residential values as more residential values came online. The University Station condominiums came online, and so they've increased the total residential value more than the commercial value. Just as a way of reference, and to your point, which was that we have been working hard to increase commercial values in town, in FY15, commercial property made up 12% of the total value. This year will be 15.25%. This next page just summarizes what we just discussed and presents it in a few different ways. The bottom left-hand corner, I think, is always a useful chart, and it just shows where we've been through FY91 through today, with presenting commercial value as a percentage of the total value. So as we've talked about in the past, commercial values in FY91 made up approximately 25% of the total value in town. It's been on a general decline since, and we've been working to get it back as a larger percentage. The next slide, the total new FY20 tax growth was 1.16 million. Residential made up 830,000 of that total, including new housing, renovations, and the condominiums at University Station, which were 503,000 of that 830,000. Commercial increased, new growth was 334,000, and that was increases in personal property.
Mark, the 125 budget, what is that referring to? After the 503, it says budget,
That was
125?
the number we had in our FY20 budget process.
Got
We're
it.
always conservative with new growth. So overall new growth, we had 575,000. It came in at 1.1. And on the University Station specific, we had 125,000.
And that's actual tax dollars.
That's actual tax
Right.
dollars, yes.
Yes. So just a few points about University Station. As we discussed, the value is as of June 30th. Any new growth that occurs up until June 30th is picked up in the FY20 budget. The residential component was a significant factor in the growth of overall residential values. And what we expect to see next year is a shift back to more commercial values as more of the commercial development comes online. Up until June 30th of 2020.
What do you think in something like the Citizens Building, where they might not have occupancy, but when does the switch over from kind of the cost of construction move to market value?
So it's always going to be, there's always going to be a percentage complete figure that's going to be calculated as of June 30th. And
Tenancy is part of it, not complete. Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no income being generated by the property, so the focus is really not on an income value. It's
Even
more,
though you know the lease is starting.
the leases are starting, and you can kind of consider what that would be. But really, when a property is that new, the focus tends to be on
So
the cost.
something like that will take place over a couple of years to realize its full value.
Yes, and as the assessment process goes on and we collect data and information about the income that that property is producing, it's likely to shift over to an income
Right. Okay.
valuation model.
So just some of that other commercial development at University Station that people see right on the main street.
Yes.
It's
Makeda
not
Building.
included in this value just because it
Right.
came after the June 30th.
So FY20, we are recommending a shift of 1.7. And just to refresh you on the background, last year, for FY15 through FY18, the shift was at 1.7. Before that, for the 7 years prior to that, the shift had been 1.65. What we were seeing was so much growth on the residential side that, that we changed the shift to 1.7. Last year, we recommended, because we were expecting that we would need a little bit of room to maneuver as more residential came online this year, to back off of that a little bit. So we recommended the 1.68, and that's what the Select Board approved.
For the viewing audience, can you just explain what shift means, what this concept is?
Correct. So, and we'll go through a few of the numbers and what's the impact of the shift. The shift allows the town to tax commercial properties at a higher rate than residential. And the shift means that we can shift a greater percentage of the total levy onto the commercial side. That's capped at 1.75% of what it would otherwise be if there was no shift.
By the state?
By the state.
Yes.
So we are, so we've been at 1.68% for 19. For FY20, we're recommending to go back to the 1.7%, meaning that the commercial is picking up 1.7% more. Actually, it's not 1.7% more, it's 70% more than they otherwise would have.
Right. So, thank you. I think it becomes sort of given, but for a lot of people, this is not so easy to understand, and I think the emphasis is on the fact that this is why we work so hard at the commercial tax base, because they take a greater percent of the burden.
They do.
In property value.
They do, and we have a few numbers that show that, and we have a few numbers that show what the savings is to the residential taxpayer if we had no shift in town. So this next segment here, the commercial property, as we discussed, is 15.25% of the total value. At a 1.7% shift, they will pay 25.9% of the total taxes. The commercial, by comparison, in FY15, the commercial paid only 21%. So that's a pretty significant increase over 5 years. The commercial rate, as we discussed, provides a significant savings to the average homeowner. The average home would pay approximately $1,380 more, or 14% more, if there was no shift. So this slide provides some information comparing FY19 to FY20. The residential, as we've talked about, was increasing from 73.3% of the total town to 74.1%. Commercial declined slightly, 26.7% to 25.9%. The shift factor last year was 1.68. We're recommending a shift of 1.7. The tax rates, so last year the residential rate was 14.65. At the 1.7 shift, the residential rate will be 14.51, which is essentially a 1% decline in the rate. The commercial will decline from 28.24%, or $28.24 per thousand, to $28.22 per thousand. So essentially keeping the commercial stable with a slight decline in the residential. If there was no shift, the decline in the residential rate would be, the commercial rate would be greater. Next slide. This gives you a little bit of a sample, a tax bill, and what the impact would be. A sample home value of $660,021 would be, the tax bill would be $9,576. That would be an increase of $279. That would be a 3% increase in the tax bill for that sample home value. And you can see where the percentage increases have been over the last several years. And again, the savings from having a split rate is $1,380 for that sample home. The next slide, this is just a number of examples of the impact of the FY20 assessments and the changing in the rates and the recommended shift. So a home value that in 19 was at, taking this first line, 1,843,000 would have increased 5.6% to 1,966,850, and their tax bill would increase approximately 4.6%.
That end of the market really increased more this year than in past few years. It's
Yeah,
been declining.
right. I
Remember,
thought
a
that-
couple of years ago, we had a real problem where
Everything was at the-
higher-end homes lost value.
Slipped, yeah.
That's why, Mark, one of the first slides, he said 98% of the homes in town
Right.
had an increase in value.
Yeah.
I think it was 2 years ago, we had about 30% of the homes in town had a
Mm-hmm.
decrease, and it was
Yeah.
that high-end home. So that didn't happen this year. The high-end homes held their value or had some good increases.
And it's in that 633 to 674 range. You just have seen the most growth in, it's really interesting.
It's the strongest area of the market.
Yeah, yeah.
Sweet spot.
It's just that the numbers are kind of have a rhythm, right? And then that just really jumps out.
Yep.
And we try, when we do an insert in the tax bill to kind of explain some of this, we've been trying to show a wide sample of home values.
Right, right.
Because we can kind of say overall numbers or,
Yeah.
kind of the average home or a sample home, but every home is different.
Right.
It really depends on the sales that occurred on your street,
Yeah.
what the desire has been for that home size as far as sales. So we've really just trying to give a range so that we're as transparent to people as possible, that not every home is going to increase in value the same, and then your tax bill is not going to be the same.
The good news, it was a good year for home values to stay strong, and that's across the board. That's good news.
It's good news.
It is good. The next slide here is, we've talked about this in the past as well, just to give you a little comparison between Westwood, what our commercial rate is in comparison to some of our neighboring communities. So the
Yeah, that's okay. We're turning around because we don't have that
Okay.
much in our packet.
Where are they going to get?
So you can see Westwood is at the bottom with a residential rate of $14.65.
Yeah, we're competitive to Dedham. Good.
So we're at the higher end of that commercial rate range, but still less than several.
Okay.
Apologize, we just kind of were able to compile that,
No,
so it
no, no
wasn't in your
problem.
initial package. But that's always important, especially on the commercial side.
Right.
That you have to be so cautious with the shift that we don't price ourselves out of a
Yeah.
competitive market for commercial activity.
Right.
So that was obviously for people who don't understand, and I believe me, the first time when I first became a selectman, I went downstairs and sat with you. It's important that people understand we're not at the 1.75, because we need to be commercially involved, and so people want to come here. So that people want to come here. So that's why we're not at the 1.75, right? And we stay more at the 1.7 to be able to stay competitive.
That, we want to stay competitive, but we also don't want to be at the max, because then we have no flexibility.
Right. So
If
that-
something happens with changing markets as we go forward.
And so people don't, for the average person who doesn't pay attention to this, they're like, why aren't we at the 1.75 getting every nickel we can? And it's because if the commercial base crashes, then the tax bill's gonna go up a lot faster than they ever imagined.
Residential.
It's a
Residential will go right up.
1991 dilemma all over again. I mean, the
Yeah.
residential.
Well, we're trying to
factor
provide
that-
stability
yeah.
here.
Till we get that percentage of commercial value up, then we can
Right.
work with the 1.75 shift. But when we're only at 15%, it's too much of a burden on that one class right now.
Right, okay.
Questions?
I just think it's important that people who are watching at home kind of get an idea.
Yeah,
I know
we
this
we
is-
certainly want to be competitive with surrounding communities, and we want to attract commercial development.
Right. I know this is a lot of work, and John, it's your first year coming forward with this, so well done. Great presentation. And I don't think we have any other questions, so I think we can go forward with the recommendation.
Yes. Go back to my,
Yep, back to the beginning.
yes.
Page 127.
Okay. So I move that we accept the recommendation from the Board of Assessors in order to keep equity among the property classes and vote to approve the tax classification factor of 1.70 for FY20.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
lot of
for your
work,
hard
I
work.
know.
Thank you.
Yep. And thank you to the other assessors and your staff. No, it's okay, you're done. You're done. You're okay.
Thank you very
Pam,
much.
however, is not done.
As
Pam's
John
just
is newbie
starting.
asked, is it okay if I leave
Yeah.
after my portion? I'm like, oh, I would say yes, you should. Thank you,
Good
John.
night. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark. All right. At our last meeting, we spent quite a bit of time kicking off the budget discussion process and focused on operating budgets. Tonight, we're going to kick off a discussion of capital, potential capital items for the upcoming year. This discussion will not conclude tonight, but we certainly have a lot to go over. And as we've been saying to people, we're trying to really delve into these things early on in the process. Pam will be going to Finance Commission next month, discussing similar material so that we can get all the finance commissioners up to speed. And we'll just keep working together with school department, municipal, and head towards a proposed budget in late February into late March. But in the meantime, we have these capital items that are very important. It's become a much bigger part of our annual discussion, but I want to make clear to the public, to the extent we discuss near-term capital items, this is part of a larger, longer-term planning process and has been. So we have a 5-year capital budget document that has been sent to us, and Pam will probably be referring to that quite often, but it's a long-term planning that we're doing. Right now, we're peeling off the nearer-term items. So I will turn it over to you for your presentation. What we did tonight, I know some people from the Finance Commission are here, want to make it a little more fluid discussion. Chair of the Finance Commission is here. We have a microphone that we can see. You don't have to be so formal standing at the mic. But we want to have more dialogue going on throughout the evening and as we do these meetings going forward. To you, Pam. Thank you.
So I just have a little bit of an overview, and then we're going to have a couple of department heads
Yep.
speak to a couple of projects for you.
Thank you.
So I just want to review, as you said, you know, we come in and do a lot of information on the budget throughout the fall and winter, working towards when the select board would present your initial budget proposal on February 1. So at your last meeting, you went through a lot of financial information, reviewing year end, looking where we stood on key financial items, and then we had a preview of the FY21 budget. Tonight, you just did your tax classification hearing, which is a major piece of setting our tax rates for FY20, the current year, getting our final tax levy in the current year, and now we can use that going forward for the FY21 budget development. And then tonight, you're starting the capital budget review. We're going to talk about an overview tonight and have a couple of departments present on specific items. December meetings, we'll continue that. We'll have other capital presentations, specific items, as well as kind of an overview of the larger capital projects and building projects ahead of the town over the next couple of years. We'll continue on the FY21 to look at revenue and expense and start to look at the municipal operating budget for FY21. Your January meetings will continue on that, again, working towards that February 1 deadline where you would come out with a proposed budget at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So just quickly on the overall capital, these are the next couple of slides you've seen before, but just a reminder that the town, it's really important that we continue to reinvest in our buildings, our equipment, our capital assets. The town has had for the last several years two base capital articles at town meeting, school and municipal. This bar graph shows how much in total for both of those articles. In the current FY20, $2.3 million, and that's currently the proposal as shown in green, that would be looking to target that for the FY21 budget. We have a financial policy that says that should be what we're maintaining and spending each year on ongoing recurring capital. And you can see on the left side of the chart that for many years the town wasn't really meeting our own financial policy. So the Select Board and Finance and Warrant Commission and Town Meeting have worked very hard to increase our ongoing capital. We've made great efforts over the last couple of years, and the plan would be to continue doing that going forward. On the next slide, a little bit of information about additional capital. Since FY17, the town has had additional capital beyond what we call the base that's been funded each year at town meeting. And in a sense, this is an effort to catch up a bit from those years that we were behind, to try to do a little bit beyond the base and get at some more projects that had been deferred. So in prior years, some of those additional items we were able to do in this extra capital, the school IT network, they had a large network issue one year, high school tennis court lighting, some pool renovation projects, and at the most recent Maytown meeting for FY20, we had some large HVAC work at Thurston Middle School, HVAC work at the COA, and some projects with field design. So those are typical of what we would fund in this extra article. In the current year, FY20, that extra article was $1.3 million, and had been, you can see the last couple of years, a significant amount, $700,000 to $900,000 in years before. So again, this is helping us to kind of do a little bit better, since we've only recently been able to meet our goal on that base capital, gets at some important projects, and for this article, we've been using free cash and the meals and hotel tax as a revenue source. So looking at the overall capital budget process, as you mentioned, we do a 5-year look. We have a significant 5-year capital improvement document that's now been produced. This is online and available for anyone on our website. It has all of the projects requested over the next 5-year period. We're more specifically looking at projects that are upcoming in FY21, but we do the 5-year look so that we know what's ahead. And that gives us the best opportunity to kind of know when we can roll projects in, when we know what we have on the horizon. When we look at the capital budget, there's really 3 categories of capital items. And the main one is that ongoing recurring capital. The continual annual investment for school and municipal in our buildings, making sure the buildings are well maintained. School and municipal both have significant IT equipment needs. The schools have the Chromebook program that needs a constant rollover. And then particularly in our public safety departments, police and fire, and DPW, those departments are really heavily reliant on equipment, their large vehicles, and then safety equipment to do their jobs efficiently and safely. So for fire, that might include radio equipment, the specialized breathing masks that they need, as well as any particular clothing equipment, that type of thing. So this is our main area of spending on capital, the ongoing recurring needs for school and municipal. So we have these pretty well defined in the capital budget book. I think our town meeting is used to these items every year. Again, these are the bulk of what we're spending in those base capital articles. The next category we're calling non-recurring projects. They're projects that don't come up every year. They might be large in nature. They're not the projects that are going to fit in those base capital items. So a couple of examples, the last several years might be turf field replacement, large road work projects, large townwide recreation projects, as we mentioned, fields or lighting or pool work. So these are things that are kind of beyond the ongoing recurring capital every year. And these are the types of projects that we want to have those departments come in and make sure that they're going through those requests with the select board so that you understand what those are. And then finally, we have our very large building renovation or new building projects, things which are not every year or every couple of years, but we're talking 20 or 30-year building projects that we evaluate. Those most often would be funded through a large bond issuance. So kind of those are our three categories. And again, the recurring have become standard. We've done a really good job of kind of doing what we need to do to make sure that we have regular ongoing rollover in those categories. Kind of the non-recurring, more non-typical projects are the ones that we want to each year do in that extra capital article, and we want to have people come in and talk to the board about those projects and make sure the town is aware of what those are. So tonight, we're going to have a couple of those projects presented to you, and we're starting with projects that had been talked about at Springtown meeting and delayed until this year. So Todd Corchin, DPW Director, is here to review with you the road bond. If you recall, there was discussion at your meetings in the spring of a large road bond, and we did one piece, the first piece of the work that was done this summer on Route 109, the sidewalk work. While Todd is here, he's also going to talk about the replacement of the multi-purpose turf field, the practice field in the back, or it's beyond the practice, originally the practice field behind the high school. Chief Deckers is here to talk about a piece of equipment for the fire department, the SWAT body truck. Another item that had been held over from May is some recreation projects, but the recreation department and Nicole Banks will be in at your next meeting to go through those. So tonight you'll have Todd and the fire chief start the review of those non-recurring projects.
Great.
And then going forward, at your next couple of meetings, would have recreation come in, and then a couple of other of these non-recurring items. Again, at your next meeting, we'll just give kind of an overview summary of what we're looking at for building projects and municipal building projects. And then we'll also start to identify the funding sources for the items that, as you go forward and you want to propose to be funded at this May town meeting, we'll start talking about how we would fund those. Free cash or meals tax or whatever our different opportunities for that.
Any questions before we go on?
No?
No.
Thank you, Pam.
So I
Mr.
think that-
Corchin?
But
Good evening.
you're all set to stay here?
Yeah, we have a
Okay, all
contingency plan in place right now. All right, so thank you for having me this evening. Thank you, Pam. I'm back to talk road improvement work
There
again.
you
It's been
go.
a few
Your
months.
favorite topic.
Let me make sure I get this right. So as with the presentation that we put forward throughout last year's town meeting process, this is pretty much a very similar presentation. We've updated a couple of the slides, but to begin with, our pavement management program drives everything that we do in town every single summer as far as our paving projects go. It identifies the infrastructure that needs to be addressed immediately, along with the infrastructure that can benefit from preventative measures. We receive typically about $560,000 from the state through the Chapter 90 program. That's really what we use every single summer to do all the projects that the town has seen us complete over the past several years. We've been fortunate enough to obtain some funding through the state through various programs, such as the Complete Streets program, the Safe Routes to School program, that has helped us out a great deal as far as offsetting the deficiency that we have. The deficiency I mentioned is simply the gap that we have of what we need to maintain our existing infrastructure. If you look at the chart down below, it basically spells it out for us. Scenario 1 is basically what we have right now. Our existing rating in town, which is our grade for pavement, is in the low 80s. If we go with scenario 1, which is just simply living off our Chapter 90 allotment annually, you can see what happens to our rating. If you go with scenario 2 and just get a small additional chunk and add in, you'll see what happens there. And obviously, to sustain what we currently have right now for a paving rating, we would need that allotment of approximately $200,000 to $250,000
So that's all
a year.
based on a formula analysis?
Exactly. And it works off our pavement management program, where it identifies needs to either crack seal, to the minor preventative measure, all the way to a mill and overlay, which is when the road is ground
You
out
just plug in
and
dollars
resurfaced.
per square foot for each type of
Correct.
whatever treatment or investment that has to be made.
Exactly, exactly right. So what the public has seen, and really what we've gotten rave reviews on, is the work that we were able to complete through the approval process of town meeting last year, where we received $900,000. That allowed us to upgrade the sidewalks approximately from Dunkin' Donuts on Route 109 all the way towards Bubbling Brook heading westbound. Those enhancements, I think everybody in town greatly appreciates. We appreciated the approval process through town meeting that allowed us to do that. But we're still left with the paving infrastructure that needs to be addressed. Originally last year at town meeting, when we were, throughout the process when we were discussing this road improvement package, the number was about $1.1 million. I've since had some great discussions with Pam, and a lot of what we did through the sidewalk enhancement program this past summer included granite curbing upgrades. What we're left with now are some gaps along 109 that don't have granite curbing, and it's just simply asphalt curbing. If we're going to go in and resurface all of Route 109, I think it would be a great benefit to just address those small gaps that we have where it's just asphalt. From an aesthetic standpoint, along with an infrastructural standpoint, I just think it would be a bonus. So we've calculated the cost to do that, added that into what was originally last year $1.1 million, and added that in making the $1.5 million. Another smaller portion of that 1.5, originally we had the limits of the work run from Gay Street all the way up to the Bubbling Brook town line. Again, I think it would be a great benefit if we took a measure of some sort to address from Gay Street up to Route 128. We wouldn't be doing a mill and overlay there because if you notice the infrastructure from Gay Street up to 128 is a lot more sound than it is heading westbound towards Medfield. So it would be a cheaper process of what we would do from those limits of work, but in theory, the 1.5 consists of the granite curbing and that measure from Gay Street to 128. So again, originally it was 1.1, now we're up to 1.5.
So just give me a comparison. When we do the granite curbing, that lasts for a very long time. I don't know what very long is, but it's not like you have to program in replacing the granite curbing.
No.
If we just have the asphalt that rolls into the street, how long does that hold up for?
Typically, your asphalt pavement road-wise, you hope you get 12 years, maybe a little bit more. Curbing is...
And then whether or
it's
not
all
you get to
relative
it is another thing altogether.
Right. It's well, the curbing to winter plows,
Yeah.
I mean, it just takes a beating. So I think a lot with the granite too is the aesthetic value it adds to the corridor. And I think, me personally, I would notice the gaps. I mean, the average eye might not, but...
Yeah, but I think John has been talking about how the sidewalk has met with such great support, and I think it's well beyond the aesthetic. I think being able to traverse it is much
Yeah.
more comfortable for
Sure.
people.
Safety, too.
Yeah,
Big
it is. It's
safety.
just so much
Big
safer, you
safety.
know.
It is.
Yeah.
Well,
It's the
it's-
distinguishing the roadway, the end of the roadway and the curb.
Absolutely.
There's so many more people walking.
Yeah.
Which is
Stretch.
that's a great byproduct of the investment too, is people wanting to use it more.
Sure, sure. And just even infrastructurally, if a panel fails with the new sidewalks we've installed, you're replacing one panel and you're not jackhammering and trying to blend asphalt and everything else.
Okay. So you're actually wanting to expand that component of the program?
Yes, yes, exactly. I just wanted to add to what we had from last year in case there are any questions as to why the number went from 1.1 to 1.5. It does, there's two portions. It's the granite curbing and then it's the limits between Gay and Route 128. So then we get into the second component of the proposed bond, which is the crosswalk safety improvements that we discussed last year. This was a study that still is in draft form that took a look at all 202 locations throughout the community. Basically, we were looking at what can we do to these crosswalks. So there are some that we can address to a major degree, some that we could address to a minor degree, some that don't need to be addressed. But the study looked at every single location and came up with recommendations for each location, which then developed a cost estimate to address all of those locations throughout the community. Some were traffic markings, signage, very light construction, and a lot of them had to do with ADA compliance issues as well.
And you're saying At this point, based on your draft report, you think it's $500,000?
Yeah, that's where the cost estimate came in.
To
and
cover
that-
the town?
To cover the town, correct. The third component, we titled paving and sidewalk enhancements. Again, the sidewalks have been a lot, there's been a lot of discussion revolving around sidewalks over the past several years. And what we were able to do on Route 109 now has drawn more interest and more eagerness to address some of the deficiencies that we have throughout the community. So a lot of these locations, very much similar to what I presented last year. It's along High Rock Street, Hartford Street improvements, Pond Street improvements. What I did add into this portion of the bond was the Winter Street, Collaboratory Street intersection improvements that we were able to complete the design on a few months ago. The reason I added it into the bond is because last year when we were pursuing the bond, I was hopeful that we would receive funding from the state through the Pursuit Streets program, and we were denied getting that funding. So the cost estimate of that was $250,000. So again, there was an adjustment made to this portion of the bond. It was initially $1.5 million, and I added the cost estimate into this from Collaboratory Street and Winter Street and bumped it up $250,000. Another segment of sidewalk that I would like to address, especially where now it looks so nice, is right from the MBTA bridge and along East Street all the way up to Smith Drive. There's some gaps there that could use significant improvement, so.
And that's often walked on?
Yes, there are.
Yeah. And these are just gaps identifying what is going to fall into this portion of the bond, the work that we would like to do. I kept, on this slide, I kept the work that we did off of Washington Street, which included Dean Street, Hooper Street, Cobley Street. We went in this past summer and resurfaced that entire neighborhood. We actually met with the neighbors on a couple of different occasions regarding sidewalk infrastructure. There was a lot of infrastructure in those neighborhoods that were just severely outdated, not sound at all, not up to compliance whatsoever. And in a lot of the work that we did enhancing those sidewalks, I think, would blend well with what we did what we would like to do off of East Street and just be consistent with what we're trying to model throughout the community. So then we get into the fourth and final component of the bond. And again, Pam and I have had great conversations. Mike's been involved with these conversations. This portion of the bond, I guess, could be pulled back or pulled out. This is more of the ongoing costs that ongoing expenses that we would like to see offset with some sort of supplementation. I referred to the Chapter 90 program that we received, the $540,000. I was looking at this as almost like, let's take that $900,000 and divide it up over a few years, or just use that to bring in and use in conjunction with our Chapter 90 money to address the larger projects that we have throughout the community. And Pam has been great. We've had those conversations more so that this is like that ongoing money that we would like to see annually, rather than, every couple of years we get something and then.
Yeah.
Then we get into just really the program summary. Again, the Route 109 project, the additional paving that needs to be done and adding into the new curbing, be about $1.5 million. Crosswalk safety improvements has stayed stable at $500,000. And that paving, sidewalk enhancements throughout the community, along with the Winter Street, Collaboratory Street intersection improvement, that was 1.75, and then the pavement preservation for 900,000, totaling the 4.650.
Okay. Questions?
So do we anticipate any more state aid? I know I recently went and the Secretary of Transportation was saying how they're come up with some money for pinch points.
Mm-hmm.
It was making me think about what we did at the end of 109 to try to create that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any other pinch points in town, but the state is offering.
That is one right there, but not that I've heard of. I haven't heard of any other opportunities. We're actively pursuing potential projects, Canton Street and some other locations throughout the community that we would like to potentially receive state funding for.
Right.
But no, they actually had some additional funding left over the fiscal year that they're going to be kicking into our Chapter 90 allotment, but it's nothing. It's a one-time shot, similar to what they did with the winter recovery money years ago. It's going to be a one-time allotment that we'll receive, so we can't really rely on anything consistent at this point.
Could you do me a favor? Could you talk about the annual allocation we receive from the state, just go back a little bit about how you determine what roads in town are coming up that, we have the road improvement program that you look at the grade of the roads and everything else. So can you just talk about how you go about that? Because there seem to be questions coming from the public regarding why isn't my road being done now, or when is it going to be done? Just want to give you a chance to speak to that.
Yeah, well, initially we do. We look at the pavement management program that forecasts out projects that we should address over the course of a 3-year time frame. Obviously, it's all funding dependent. That you have a project that, a mill and overlay could cost you $250,000 to $300,000, and there's 65 to 70% of your allotment right out of the gate. So what we like to do is look at that 3-year span and address our major roadways out of the gate, just like we do with snow and ice when we're plowing. Your major roadways are first and foremost. And then you look into the secondary roadways and what measures you can take, what measures you can afford to take based on the program. You make your adjustments. Obviously, Mother Nature dictates a lot of what goes on every year, too. You might have a roadway infrastructure that you would deem, or you could say, could wait another year or two rather than going right out of the gate. And then winter hits and that roadway starts to deteriorate at a faster clip, which we reassess come January, February, seeing what the early stages of the winter are doing to that infrastructure. But for the most part, it's funding dependent. Obviously, if we receive extra money, additional funding, we can be more flexible with what we do and more aggressive. That's what I would like to see us do. But to say that everything is decided off a computer program, that's not accurate either. We rely on it, but at the same time, observation and
Judgment.
it is.
And you go out to bid usually late winter?
January.
January. So you can get going. When does paving start? April?
July 2nd. Not July, July 5th. I always tell our contractors, come in the day after 4th of July.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
go. And they do, and we're
Okay,
out of
so
there
you got
by
them all
August.
teed up.
Yeah.
But you've done some projects, maybe not the roadway projects like this, but you've done some infrastructure projects starting in April.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Whenever you can. Okay.
definitely.
I want people to understand there's a thoughtful process behind and
Sure.
and limited resources that you work with, so.
We have everything forecasted out right now. I have on my board in the office, and we've actually messaged out our projects, not only for next summer, but for the following summer. But we have everything really mapped out for 3 years, like I said. But then, again, everything is subject to change. And it's assuming we're going to have X amount of funding to work with. The bids are going to come in at X, and we're going to be able to.
I think it might be good if you, somewhere along the way, supply us with what that 3-year outlook is,
Sure.
just because it
So
is
this
important.
would be funded by a bond issuance
Yeah.
within Proposition 2.5. And we had talked in the spring and at your last meeting when we looked at debt, that there is a current road bond ending. The last one we issued was about 10 years ago, 2012. That's coming up. We could time the issuance of this bond to come in and replace that debt. And then that's about when we'd like to issue road bonds, is every 10 years. We would not extend that term longer, because then in another 10 years out, there'd be other major work to do. So we would be able to bring this online within our current debt budget. And I just want to mention that Todd mentioned that 900,000, how that really is, once we go forward, we really need to increase on an annual basis about 300,000 a year.
Right.
If we kept the 900 in the bond, though, it would be almost like a jump start on that
I
and give
see.
us time to build up that 300,000. So maybe over the next couple of budget years, we increase 100,000 and then another 100 till we get there. And we actually did that in that last DPW bond that we did 10 years ago. We had been behind on the DPW ongoing equipment.
Yes, we had.
And we made a commitment
It's
to build that
very
in the
aged
budget.
equipment.
But we put some of it into a bond to kind of give us a jump start and get ahead. And then now we've been committed to having ongoing regular funding of that equipment on a routine basis. So that's what he was mentioning with the 900. But, I think it would be good to get a jump start. There has been some talk, as Mike mentioned, about the state increasing that Chapter 90
It's been a
annual
long time
allocation.
since anything's been done with that.
Yes, so I think that's coming, but I don't think it's within the next year.
Right, all right. Well, that's encouraging. Okay, why don't you talk about the field?
Okay, so the field that we're referring to is the Westwood High School practice field, which is located out back, not to be confused with Flay Hive, which we just completed, not just 3 years ago.
Yeah, really, time flies.
Every single year, we run what's called a GMAX test. It's basically a standard test measuring the shock absorption rate for the field, and it also identifies problematic areas within the field and the structure of the field itself. Fortunately, even when we replaced the Flay Hive field years ago, there was no infrastructural concerns underneath the field. There were no drainage issues, so that saved the town a lot of money. And it's the same with the practice field. What we do have, though, is significant wear and tear on that field, and it's not able to sustain or hold any of the rubber infield mix, which is really what cranks the GMAX numbers up through the roof. So the field it was installed back in August of 2008. So this past August reached its 11th year. Typical life expectancy of the turf fields run between 10 and 12 years. So I would say we got our money's worth out of that field. And I mean, it's time for a replacement now. We've been able to do some treatments over the past year just to keep it really in playable shape, but
What's the estimated cost?
I put in about $750,000. It should come a little bit below that, but what I would like to do is enhance that field too, just to make it really universal to all the sporting groups that play there, similar to what we did on Flay Hive.
So what is that, the markings and things?
Markings, yeah. It has the markings out there now, but not to the degree that even Flay Hive has now, and the technology that they're able to incorporate into the newer fields.
But it does get used by multiple sports, so I
Yeah, sure
imagine that
does.
would be.
Yeah.
It's more of a practice field, though.
It is, yeah.
Right. It doesn't, I don't think it needs to be as great as Flay Hive.
No,
I thought it was games, too.
It wouldn't
They
be as great,
rotate,
like,
they rotate kids, though. There's no dedicated team on that
No.
field.
Yeah, I just remember many a lacrosse game there.
definitely. And we went with Flay Hive, where that's the
That's the
focal
showcase,
field. Yeah,
yeah.
we lettered the end zones, and
Right,
that was aggressive, and rightfully so, but this doesn't have to be to that extent. But
Right.
just
Okay.
even making it universal enough for the sporting groups to have the markings and not.
I guess my other question is that we had talked about a study of all those fields, and I'm worried about sequencing. We have the land behind First Parish that we still don't know what we're going to do with. We may do something. So my fear is we're going to spend this money and then realize that actually things aren't situated just as they should be.
Right.
So to the right of this field, the parking lot, and there's just some empty space. They put up a batting cage at some point. There's a volleyball net at some point, but there's just vast openness. And so I just fear that we'll commit ourselves when actually there's a better usage for all the space. Like I do think that, I spend a lot of time at that field. I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world if we wait another year. So
Yeah.
I'd like to kind of have some more clarity with you and Nicole together around what is the long-term plan of all that space.
Yeah, I know there's been discussions, but quite frankly, our involvement with those discussions has been, Todd, we need a field, can we do it over now? So as far as the user groups and
Yeah.
the plan for what.
It's more recreation.
Rec has, yeah, but I hear you, I mean, I've
Now's the
heard
time to get
those.
everything together.
It's an awful lot of money to spend.
It's a lot of money, and I don't want 2 years from now saying, oh, we wish it was like 20
Right.
feet to the right, right?
Right.
Like I just, it's not a great field, but it's a practice field. And,
Yeah,
and the youth sports teams make sure that no team is playing there consistently. So it doesn't feel ripe to me. I just think we could maybe take a step back on that.
If there are discussions too, like if there's potential, it definitely makes sense. I will say the test scores and the GMAX rate, and there are areas of concern in this field, but I mean, I don't.
But you go to
It's like
you go to
it's
other
going-
towns, and
Oh,
this
yeah.
is a 10 in other towns, right?
Yeah.
So it's
It's
all relative.
right.
Okay, let's move along. Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, Todd.
Chief, we'd like to hear about this special truck. So last year, we did discuss a little bit about this new type of truck, and we'd like to hear more and hear more about why you think this would be appropriate for the
Sure.
department.
So what I've done here is when I first came in, I was starting to look at a bunch of different things in overall leadership, cost-effective delivery of service, and I looked at the fleet. And in the capital plan, we had 2 squad trucks that were scheduled to be replaced over the last couple of years that I held up and didn't push them forward because I had some different ideas around that. These fire trucks, because that's what they are limited to what they can do for us. Basically, they're a fire engine that by contract requires us, if we roll them out to a fire-related incident, they have to have 3 members on it. Which in trying to keep our staffing low and not staffing to that component, just like we did with the peak level staffing, we are staffing to the appropriate size. I'm now trying to get our fleet to the appropriate size, but give us more flexibility. So when you start looking at that, the fire service years ago started to incorporate new ideas, such as the Quint, which Ladder 2 is, and that's a multi-function truck. It can function as a ladder truck or an engine. Same thing we did with the Ferraris that we just purchased, the two brand new engines. They're rescue engines, so they serve a dual purpose. They're a rescue truck, they hold all our rescue equipment, and they hold engine capability. So now what I'm looking at is what more flexibility can I bring to it? I have these 2 squad trucks. If we replace them, would be about $600,000. We try to mirror what we have at both stations due to the flexibility that we use organizationally, because we cross-staff depending upon need. So we want to be able to have, duplicates of things if we can, but if I don't need to have a duplicate, I can stack everything at Station 1 because I have the staffing there. And if we do it right, one person can jump into that vehicle and deploy resources that need to get deployed, opposed to having to try to find 3 people to do it. So what I'm looking to do now is take a concept that was used very extensively in Europe, but they started doing it over here about 10 years ago, but on a much smaller scale. In your packet that I gave you, you see these, what was the first generation really is the pickup truck that they would slide utility bodies into the back of. But the downside with that, again, is I need more people because they can't lift it or they have to get hoist or do a bunch of different things. I'm looking for now something that literally where you can just drive up to it, throw the hook out, pick it up, throw it on your back and go. Deploy it at a scene, drop it, drive away, go up and pick the next pod up, drop the next pod where we need it, depending upon the scene. And broadening what we're doing, because one of the things I need to replace that I've left out of the capital budget is one of our cascade system that replenishes and refills air bottles, because I'm incorporating it into the cost of this truck. And it's a pod that can actually stay in the station, and when we need it, we go and we grab it and we bring it to the scene. It's self-sufficient, where currently we have units that are installed in the station and can't be moved. So I'm looking to be very flexible with that, and that's where this truck fits that need. So what I'm really asking to do is replace these 2 trucks that we had already in the queue to replace, that I pulled out from last year, and put this swap body in, moving from a $600,000 price tag more down to the $400,000. I gave you a rough breakdown of what we're looking for on page 5 and 6 of cost, well, page 5. Which basically breaks down the cost of that truck and what we're looking to do. The other big thing we're looking to do too, because of the size of this truck, is we have to look at the community risks that we've identified, especially through the program that we just sat through with the MVP program, the Municipal Vulnerability Plan. And there's some big concern about flooding and all that kind of stuff. The trucks that I have currently are awesome trucks for pavement. They do not go off-road very well at all. I've heard a story of where one of our guys in one of our older trucks buried one right in the front yard of somebody's house, and we had to get tow trucks to get this thing out. The squads are designed to actually go off-road. This other truck, this multi-purpose truck, is designed to go off-road. So if we had a scenario like that, this truck would be ideal to get us in places where we couldn't go with our normal trucks, and has the ability to flop body styles depending upon need. And the other big one is that during the winter, Todd's, folks are straight out with everything. And last year, I actually on the phone called Todd. He said, "Todd, we got a medical call. The roads are completely impassable. Can you send me a plow truck?" He's like, "Oh, I'll get one there."
You could do it yourself.
But if we
you
could needed do it to. ourselves, which they were behind, and we sent our pickup truck, and the pickup truck just had to suffer trying to get this. This bigger truck would handle that, and it'd be a compliment to Todd's crew. where we'll put a big enough plow and sander on it for those storms, so we can put that out with our ambulances. That's where we have the flexibility with this style truck, opposed to just 2 squad trucks, to be perfectly frank. Have only gone to, in my 2 years here now, maybe 5 events. That's a total waste.
Well, for the record, one's 28 years old and the other's 29 years old.
The
so
29-year-old
It's
is
out of service,
parked,
right.
and it's not working because
Out of
it's cost
service.
too much money to fix what needs to be fixed on it. I cannot see investing good taxpayers' money into a truck that needs that kind of work. That's not going to give us any life to it. And I have to jam 3 people in it to move it. It's not even designed to fit 3 people in. They got one person has to sit in the middle on top of the, the steering columns and
Okay.
stuff, so.
So you're just, instead of replacing with the same, you're thinking of, what do I replace that gives us more flexibility and provides, it meets the needs of service that wasn't even contemplated a few years ago, as you talk about flood-related
Right.
service. And if you can get through snow-related events, which we know we can count on having.
Yep. And then gives us more flexibility to do things that we've never thought of doing before to help our residents, such as there's 3 pods that are being built when we do this, strictly for storage of materials. So we had a fire in town. Everybody got out, everyone was fine, but their belongings had to stay inside the house because it takes a while for the insurance companies to come out and do stuff. We can bring these pods, drop them on location, bring all the savable material that they have, lock them in there, and park it on their site. Now, that's a little progressive. Why should we have to do that? Because it helps our taxpayers save their stuff, and it's not in a house that's open potentially to the cold elements, things getting destroyed. So it's important that we look at things like that to just give that added value.
Where do you store these pods when they're not in use?
At station, at Station 1, we would put them in the back. They would just stack up. The pod that has the cascade system actually will fit right in the building and connect to the building. And when it comes out of the building, it's self-contained, so it has its own generator. So it produces its own power. We have a lot of flexibility when it comes to things like that.
So when we talk about this further and it goes to Finance Commission, can you get pictures? What we have pictures of is not
It
of
is,
that.
well,
Right. I can, there's one picture in there from West Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah.
So those are what the
you go.
bodies look like.
Got it.
I can blow it up into a bigger picture.
Yeah, I think show and tell is
blow it up.
helpful.
Just-
And I also really like, just so people here know and Finance Commission knows, we have a schedule of the fleet, when it was purchased, when it will need to be replaced. I think all that helps fill in information.
if you do this, right?
And there, I actually gave you a site to go and
Saw that,
actually
yeah.
log
Oh,
on
okay.
to West Des Moines' site where they actually talk about the truck itself. If you get an opportunity, click onto that and look at that very short video on the flexibility. Most of these, I tend to be a little, as I've told you before, a little out of the box in my thinking with things. Most of them use this in their special operations divisions. We're a small enough organization where I don't have a special ops division, so I have to think more globally on where can I fit it into my system to make it more cost-effective for service delivery. So for me, it would be part of our ongoing regular fleet.
And this would be a straight-out purchase, not a lease.
Correct. Well, that, I'm going to leave.
Sometimes we just
lease.
straight out purchase, but sometimes with the larger fire capital, we lease it, or we could include it in our own borrowing. And since we have other ongoing borrowings happening, we would probably do that.
To
where
do
we
a
can
purchase, but pay for it over time.
Pay for it over time. And again, not a long period of time, but we could do, a 3 to 5 year period.
Okay, that's something for further consideration. I know, well, let me ask you if you have questions.
I don't have questions. I mean, I'm skeptical. I think you've gotten that from me before. This is popular in Europe. There's not one fire entity in Massachusetts that's done this.
Not to my knowledge in the sense of the way I want to deliver it. Most of them use trailers. So what I'm looking to do is save cost in the sense of using a truck. We're looking at an industry in the trash disposal industry that uses roll-offs all the time. Very consistent truck to deliver the pods, so that we're maintaining one chassis opposed to trailers where you're maintaining, bearings and tires and all that stuff. Where these are pods, they're delivered and done.
It's just, I think what comes to mind is like jack of all trades, master of none. So I'm hearing like we're going to store people's belongings, we're going to be snow plowing, we're going to be setting up special operations, and I'm like, I like cutting edge and I like new ideas. It doesn't feel like Westwood. I mean, my understanding is the number of fire calls is actually stable down, right? It's ambulance runs.
Basically maintained, other than a few anomalies that had caused us to jump. So
Right.
We're in the same, but for us, you use that example of the snow jack of all trades, master of none. So what I'm looking at is, instead of just buying apparatus to replace what we had of old to be like we were in Westwood, I'm looking to change it for the future to where we should be going. So we should be going to be able to support ourselves when we need to, just like FEMA requires us as a community to maintain our ability to serve for 72 straight hours without any involvement from the outside. I want to be able to do that with our troops. So I would argue that the Quint concept is a jack of all trades, master of none. So it's the same concept.
But the Quint was kind of the industry standard when we bought it. We weren't the first to buy the Quint.
That's true.
And so here, we would be the first, and again, the status of our, we've kept everybody safe, right? I mean, we haven't identified a gap in coverage. This is just what we could do above.
So what I would need to do is I need to buy another, brush truck, if we're just going to buy a brush truck. To me, it didn't seem like the right investment when we can spend just a little bit of extra money, because if I buy the brush truck, then I have to buy the cascade system, so combined, they're going to be $400,000. So I'm saying, let's take that $400,000 and be progressive, and give us things that we can do more with.
Will be risky.
No, I don't see a risk in it, because if I go and we move to a trailer-based system, which is a custom that or we buy individual pieces to fit need, then we end up increasing our costs, because now we have maintenance costs, insurance costs, and all that go with it, where let's just worry about one, and then we can be
What might
flexible.
be
I guess
good
I
is
would
if-
say, though, if there's 351 municipalities in Massachusetts, and we're the first, that's
There's
a
nothing
risk.
wrong with being the first, though.
Well,
What
I
might
like to
be
spend our
helpful,
money
John,
wisely.
is if you can do a, Plan A, Plan B, or option 1, option 2 would be a better way to put it. Option 1 would be just to replace like what we have and do a kind of a comparison chart with the things you just said. I'm not sure that will answer or speak to the issues that John is raising, but I think it would be helpful just as you make a case for it and we decide whether or not to proceed. Mr. Walsh?
I had a chance to watch the video while the conversation's going. It seems like it's a better way to go than to replace just a brush truck.
This is just the beginning of the discussion, so we can. I failed to ask Finance Commissioner or the public if they wanted to comment on Todd before and he left, but any questions from anybody? Yeah, you will. You will. Okay. Shall we call it a night on the capital discussion?
Sounds good.
Thank you, John.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Pam.
you.
Audit Committee report. I know we have a
It's a
couple
money
of
night. It's a money night.
Yeah. So we have with us 2 members from the Audit Committee, Susan Flanagan Cahill and Mike Papetti. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so as we have been doing, for how many years now? 6?
I think, 6 or
6,
7.
7 years since we created an audit committee that came out of the charter update that we did. We established this committee and our appointees have stayed on, which is great, and this is an added check to the audit process that the town goes through, but you folks doing it on our behalf to come back to us and say, what should we be paying attention to? And that gives feedback to the staff, and also if there are any concerns that might be in the offing that you think we should be putting on our radar. So first I want to say I appreciate the fact that you do this job for us, because it's very important to know that things are checked and double-checked.
I would say we established it 7 years ago, and they've been here every year that I've been here. So.
Yep, they have, and we appreciate it. So, to you.
Great, thank you.
So we have a written report that we can provide.
Yes.
But,
Okay.
I would tell you this year, I think it was probably, easy is the wrong word, but as far as issues are concerned, it was probably a lighter year from an accounting and auditing standpoint. The last couple of years, a couple of new accounting pronouncements that caused, as you know, both the pension liabilities and the OPEB liabilities to come on the financial statements have been put in place. So that's sort of behind us. So I would say the audit process this year was relatively routine. You know, the same firm that the town has used for many years, who's an expert in this kind of accounting. So they did not have a management letter. They issued an unqualified opinion. That's all good.
That's nice.
They had very good things to say about the CAFR process, the process that the team puts together that set of financial statements, which is, as I'm sure you know, very complex and voluminous. And the support that the audit firm got from the town is important to note, because that doesn't always happen, and it did here. All positives. The only thing that we'd probably talk a little bit about is the school activity audits. So, as you recommended, I believe, and we agreed, the town does an audit of every school's activity account every year. And they were done earlier this year, which was great. They were done in August, so there was time to react to those as the school year started. And I would say the auditors have described the findings as minor, but for each school, there's a handful of findings. And if I was to characterize them, I'd probably characterize them in two areas. One would be school committee policies that could be adopted for things like travel reimbursement, et cetera. And those are being acted on, I believe, with the school committee. And then formality around the documentation at each school. Depending on the school, from high school down to the grammar school, some have spreadsheets, some have systems. And I think a lot of the recommendations were around sort of formalizing that as best as it could. But I know there were no major findings. So we would expect that those audits will happen every year. We did ask that they take those findings and have a written response to all, just so we all know what the response is going to be, and if, God forbid, anything happens, you actually have a response. So I don't know, Susan, is there anything else?
No, the
you-
only thing I would add is we did have the opportunity, we met with Lemma as well, and so she, spoke to us about what she's been doing. She's meeting with each of the schools individually, and one of the other items that was identified in the auditor's reports was training, and that some of the staff was not, sufficiently trained on how they're supposed to manage and handle the money. So Lemma is, working on that as well, trying to implement some training programs. So it was helpful to talk to her. And as Mike said, we did ask for a written response to each of the findings. So we'll look for that as well.
It feels like we've come a long way, though, because there was a while when these weren't even looked at.
Correct.
Right.
And then
Yes.
I think we looked at a few, and now we're looking at them all annually, so it's a good
And that helps create consistency, I'm sure, for the schools to have it reviewed regularly.
Absolutely,
This
yes.
Personnel changes.
Right, exactly.
Volunteers change, whatever
Yeah.
I think that
impacts
is one of
those
the big issues,
accounts.
is the personnel changes.
But, I don't know, does this cross over to PTOs as well, or is that kept separate? That's not part of what the audit,
No.
Because it just, it's, to the extent you ever see ways to standardize those things too, it's just good for discipline.
Yeah.
You have people come and go and.
Right. Yeah, we know.
My wife's at the kitchen island a lot of
Yeah.
nights cursing us. I mean,
Yeah.
the good news is, what we have found is that it's great that we can offer so many activities.
Right.
The problem is it becomes a lot of little checks, right?
Yeah.
There's just a lot of flowing cash, it seems,
Right.
right? And trying to capture it all is the challenge. There's never any malintent. It's just,
Right.
oh, I forgot I had this check in my pocket,
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to call it fuzzy numbers, so.
Well, let's
Try to
not
stay
have
away
it
from that
bad.
term.
But it has, in a few short years, really structured. I mean, it went from
Yes.
0 to now at least identifying that it's happening could be better. Well, that's a
Right.
really positive.
Right, that's what it feels like. And Mike, you mentioned the audit firm and being experts in municipal accounting, so no concerns there, because that's part of what we have to think
No, as a
about
matter
is
of
that
fact,
we're
I
with
have
the
no-
right firm.
I have a number of colleagues who are on audit committees in various towns, and
Yeah.
Powers and Sullivan are at most of them, and I believe really do a good job in the audit. We had some issues around timing of those audits last year, the activities audits, and that's why they were able to move that process into August so that we got them ahead of time, which was good.
Good.
And they were very responsive in that regard.
Yes.
Good. Well, that's all good news. That's
Yes.
really the way we want it, but if you highlight things that need to be addressed, then we do that too. So, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Very
Anything
much.
else?
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you
coming in.
both.
And thanks for hanging
Okay.
around so late.
Yeah. Had a couple meetings in a row.
How's the
Very
hockey season going?
Good. It's going all right. Yeah, how about you?
It was good. It was a fun weekend. I barely lost in a tie, but it was a good
Oh,
weekend.
that's right, yeah.
So let's try to wrap up the regular business for tonight. Our next item is a sidewalk construction easement for 80 Wilson Way. This is over the commercial area off Route 1 by Mercedes. And we have been informed that there will be a sidewalk construction at 80 Wilson Way, which will extend a portion of the sidewalk onto town-owned land. And as a result, we are being asked to provide a temporary construction easement for the property owner of 81 Wilson Way so that that owner can construct a sidewalk from their property extending approximately 21 feet onto town-owned right-of-way connecting to the existing East Street sidewalk. And the sidewalk construction is contingent upon the property owner securing the necessary curb cut and street opening permits for the town and supplying a $5,000 bond to complete the work. Are there any concerns we should have about this, Mike?
No, this would be.
Very straightforward?
Pretty straightforward, and it's a developer that's funding the construction, so we're just giving the easement. We'll end up assuming the responsibility for that section of sidewalk that once it gets constructed, for maintaining it, but that's not a big deal.
But if there's snow or whatever, we're not going to go in and do 21 feet. Is the
No,
owner going to take care of the snow clearing and stuff?
Yeah, he'll be doing, he's doing this to provide access for his employees to get the train.
Yeah,
Be
the
able to
tenant
walk 'em back and
employees,
forth
yeah.
To the train.
Any questions?
Mike, do the abutters know that this is coming?
I don't,
You know
I
what I
don't see why the abutters
I just don't know, where this is gonna go in relation to any houses or?
No. It's along the property that he owns and then onto the public way to connect to the sidewalk.
Okay,
So no houses involved.
okay. I just don't want to approve it, then have somebody come and say,
No,
we didn't know this was happening.
no.
Okay.
We're only giving the easement. We're not
Easements,
Right, right.
approving anything else. Okay.
We're giving the easement, and by virtue of doing it, we're allowing him to construct the sidewalk.
Right, we could, yeah, not giving the easement would be an impediment.
Yeah.
I get it.
So I move that we approve a temporary construction easement for the property owner of 80 Wilson Way.
81.
It's 80, actually, right?
Right, the typo, sorry, thank you. Sorry.
Okay. To construct a sidewalk for their property extending approximately 21 feet onto town-owned right-of-way, connecting to the existing East Street sidewalk. The sidewalk construction is contingent upon the property owner securing the necessary curb cut, the street opening permits from the town, and a $5,000 bond to complete the work.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Next item is an access agreement for 277 to 283 Washington Street. This would be an agreement between the Town of Westwood and Petruzziello Properties LLC for the property located at the previously mentioned address. The Select Board would serve as the grantee, granting the property located at 277, 283 Washington Street to Petruzziello Properties by deed dated, it was done by deed dated November 26, 2018. The grantor, in this case Petruzziello Properties, will convey a portion of the property back to the Town of Westwood in accordance with the land disposition agreement dated June 11, 2018, as subsequently amended. And this is being done to complete the relocation of the Wentworth Hall and the construction of additional community space. The town would need access for site work on a portion of the property located at the address mentioned. The presented agreement was prepared by Special Counsel Dan Bailey and reviewed by town staff, the developer, and the developer's counsel. So, Mike, in English, that means?
Yep. I'm gonna have Nora,
He's giving us right
Nora
to-
provide the detail, she
to
can
use
do a
the
better
land,
job
that's all.
of it.
I just wanted the
Yeah,
layperson's
that's right.
version.
Yeah, the layperson version is he's giving us the right to use the land. That's
Exactly.
right.
The project has 3 separate closings. In the first closing, we gave the developer the what was the former municipal parking lot. In the second closing, we're taking it back. And in the meantime, before we have that second closing, we're building a foundation so that we can move Wentworth Hall and put it on top of the new foundation. We won't actually receive the land until after we've done that. So there's an interim period of time where the town is doing construction work on a property that we don't own. And this agreement is just to allow us access and to
A bridge.
hold harmless
Right.
the property
We're
owner
in-
while that's
And
being
we're
done.
indemnifying him of any damage that we might
Thank
do.
you for the
in
English
doing
version. I get it.
The
Questions?
The non-lawyer version?
Yeah, something like that. I think we all
No.
should know exactly what it means.
Yes.
Any questions for Mike? Okay, motion?
Okay, so I move to approve the access agreement for 277-283 Washington Street and to authorize the town administrator to sign on behalf of the select board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Next item is opening the annual town meeting warrant. We usually do this about a month before we close the warrant. In this case, we're doing it a little bit ahead of schedule, which is fine. Nothing says we can't. So our action would be to open the 2020 annual Springtown meeting warrant. And I just want to say a few things. When we do this, it means that any petitioners who want to place articles on the warrant can do so during this period of time. They need to comply with the minimum of 10 signatures of registered voters. And as we established in our last charter review, the petitioners are encouraged to present and review a draft of their petition language with members of the Finance Warrant Commission, Select Board members, and/or Town Council in advance of actually
Getting
submitting the petitioner articles. Now, it's up to people to decide what they want to do with that, but at a minimum, I would say they would benefit by meeting with Town Council. Having said that, there is a process, and we're going to be reviewing any articles submitted by department heads at our meeting on December 16th, so this is all standard practice. Any questions or comments? Motion?
I move that we open the town meeting warrant for the 2020 annual town meeting and indicate that we plan to close the warrant at our first meeting in January.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. On to old business. Comcast Cable Communications closed a public review period. We opened the public review period at our last meeting, and this is to receive input regarding the ascertainment hearing for the Comcast Cable Communications license renewal. We had that hearing back in November, and if anybody wanted to submit, they should have done so by tonight. And this is just to close that public hearing, or we're concluding the public hearing as well?
Yes.
Okay, so we're closing both the public hearing and the review period. Motion?
So did you want to see if anyone is here to make comments on the public hearing?
Anybody here to make comments on that before we close? I was
Okay.
out on a limb, I was
That's
pretty
all right.
sure.
I was pretty sure too, but just so anyone watching.
the record.
Wait, correct, thank you. So I move that we close the Comcast Cable Communications public review period that was held on October 28th, 2019, and was to close this evening, November 18th, 2019, as part of the Comcast Cable Communications license renewal process.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. And lastly, under old business, we had created the Town Administrator Screening Committee, and tonight we will dismiss the Town Administrator Screening Committee. So I'll just take a motion on that.
So I move that we dismiss the Town Administrator Screening Committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. I forwarded edits to the minutes late, and so I think given we have people who are still here who are going into executive session, I think we'll, yeah, if you can just send edited versions to, and if anybody else has any, get them in, but I think we'll be able to do those at our next meeting. Okay, so we do have executive session coming up. We need to go into executive session for two issues. One is pursuant to Mass General Law, Section 30, or Chapter 30A, Section 21A4, to discuss strategies with respect to cybersecurity. And the second is pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A4, to discuss strategy for contract negotiations with the police chief, both of which would have detrimental effect on the position of the governing body if the discussion were held in open session. And we will not, we may be returning to open session? Why?
We're not.
Oh, to approve
No
a contract
contract.
or no?
We can do that next meeting? I don't know.
We can do that at the next meeting.
Or should I leave the option
You can
open?
leave the option open.
I will leave the option open. We may be returning to open session, but that will be determined by our executive session discussion. I'll take a motion.
I move that we go into executive session for the aforementioned reasons.
Second.
Mr. Walsh?
Aye.
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
I say aye as well. Our next meeting will take place on Monday, December 2nd, at which time we will have our new town administrator with us, as well as our retiring town administrator. Thank you.